What if there was a scandal and nobody covered it, or maybe just present company? There's a whole lot going on at the state capitol. I'm trying to figure out why the media's not taking hold of it. And the campaign gets hotter. Coming up next, it's Mitchell Talks, the News 9 sessions. Hey, the kids did a better job this week asking questions than the media has. Present company excluded during this campaign. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But I'm starting to think that maybe on some of these issues that we really need to be delving into, Oklahoma media is just not going to engage. Is my cynicism wrong?
I don't think so. I don't know. The thing that we're going to talk about here, which was Aaron's story this week, it's a lot of heavy lifting, to your credit and to not so much to the credit of the rest of the media here in Oklahoma.
The Oklahoma legislature is absent a handful of Republican incumbents. They lost their re-election bids after voting against tax increases to fund teacher pay raises.
And teachers have gotten much of the credit for ousting them, but it turns out their own party members turned against them. News 9's Aaron Brilbeck joins us with why that happened. Aaron?
Yeah, Republican members of the so-called Platform Caucus voted against House Bill 1010XX. That was the tax increase that paid for teacher pay raises, and they paid for that decision at the polls. But it wasn't just teachers that put them on the unemployment line. The AP first reported Republican Representative Chris Kennedy had conversations to oust his ultra-conservative Republican colleagues. He would not say who those conversations were with and refused to answer our questions on camera, but said the Platform Caucus drew first blood and in a statement told us, quote, "I'm a Marine, so it should not have surprised them that I supported most of their opponents after being provoked." Kennedy also stressed leadership did not know what he was doing at the time, and GOP House leaders say that's true.
A couple days before the election, I did become aware that there was a group inside the caucus that were targeting some races against other Republicans inside the caucus.
Representative George Faught, one of the Republicans ousted in the primaries, said, quote, "I don't know how leadership couldn't know about it." Eccles won't say whether Kennedy will be disciplined.
This fight had been going on for a while, and it had been going on really on both sides. I mean, both sides felt attacked by the other side.
An out-of-state dark money group called the Conservative Alliance PAC also worked to oust incumbent Platform Caucus members. Records show one of its top 10 vendors was Advocacy Insights, a print company run by Oklahoma political strategist Trevor Worthen. Worthen is a former partner with AH Strategies, which managed State School Superintendent Joy Hoffmeister's campaign when she was accused in an illegal fundraising scheme. Worthen says his company's only connection to Conservative Alliance PAC is that it made flyers slamming Platform Caucus member Mike Ritz, who lost in the primaries. Eccles says he's ready for the November elections, and what he hopes is an end to Republican infighting.
We've gone through the election cycle. It's time for the caucus to come back together and to work for the good of the entire state of Oklahoma.
On the scene, on the story, Aaron Brilbeck, News 9.
Well, the time has come for Oklahoma media to actually talk about the people that run the campaigns. They just won't get into it. I mean, that's insane. Whenever you have stuff at the national level, we know these, you turn on MSNBC or CNN or Fox or CBS, any of these folks, you see the people behind the scenes. Steve Bannon, Steve Schmidt, Karl Rove. For heaven's sakes, I don't know why the media refuses to get back in. These people are doing business. A lot of them are good people, good guys and girls, right? But the whole point that the media doesn't get into the behind the scenes here in Oklahoma, again, present company excluded, is just makes your head want to explode. It's part of public policy. It's part of these campaigns. And why a story, to all credit due, you took an AP story, you did your story, and then crickets. Cue the crickets in terms of the media. This is a big story. And the fact is, when you don't talk about things whenever you don't have to, right? I mean, it's happening in the governor's race. I'll tease that up. But if the media doesn't say, here's your chance to explain, and you look the other way, and you're a candidate, you can get away with it if the other media is out doing whatever.
And this is a pretty important one. This shines a light in an area of the Capitol that we don't normally see. It shows, because the assumption is you got Republicans that work together, you got Democrats that work together. Well, it turns out there are warring factions within the Republican Party, and this is evidence of that.
It's really fascinating to watch this happen to one of the parties, and I'm assuming it's happening in the Democratic side just to a weaker extent because they're not in control. But it doesn't look good for governance. This is a problem for Republicans to continue to have this. I think John Eccles is right about that. I mean, from one standpoint, if Edmondson wins the governor's race, because they're playing this long ball for this thing here, if he wins that, and then you open the door as Republicans for the Democrats to gain some ground. If you're fighting each other, you can't turn and fight the other side. From a purely political standpoint, I'm sure we would not like them to be fighting each other all the time. But then for a Republican standpoint, Stitt's an outsider, and he wins the governor's race. He's going to need people who he can trust and who are willing to give him good advice and not try to screw someone in their own party to move forward, because no matter how much he says, he'd run the state like a CEO, those people always have trouble moving into a new place, and they'll need Sherpas, they'll need guiders.
And we're setting ourselves up right now. We're in such a good spot between the additional money that we're making, the changes that the legislature made. The teachers are now more satisfied with their pay. So we're moving in the right direction. But if we have this infighting, that's going to concern people. And I think that's going to concern voters come November. The registration numbers, voter registration numbers, are up pretty dramatically. Board of Elections says 76,000 people have registered to vote since January 15th. Republicans still make up 60% of the new voters, increasing by more than 44,000. Republicans make up 47.2% of registered voters in the state. Democrats 37%. Independents making up 15.4%. So what does that tell you? Does that tell you that Republicans are getting energized? They are going to get behind candidates?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I would like to know more about that. We don't track that. The State Election Board doesn't track that. I think a lot of this on both sides has to do, first, with national issues, with the president and just the roil of scandals and news coverage that happens every day. I think in the later months, the Kavanaugh nomination did a lot to energize voters on both sides of the aisle. And then I think the earlier year voters who registered this year, I think education is huge for them. I think you saw a lot of turnout and new registrations for medical marijuana. And then the governor's race. People really care about electing a new governor. They don't really care about the down ballot races so much. But I don't know if that's even going to matter in the end, because these people have to continue their motivation to the election booth and or to the voting booth, and I don't know if that's going to make it or not.
But I would think, given what you said, the presidential scandals, the medical marijuana, that would draw more Democrats, not more Republicans.
Maybe. I mean, there's some polling out there right now that looks like Republicans are turning out to defend their president and defend those policies against what they already see as a surge in Democrats. And we would in Oklahoma, we would likely see that to be more on the Republican side anyway. I think the other story here is how much of the electorate independents make up. Catherine Sweeney at the Journal Record had a great series of articles about this, but a surprising amount. I mean, in the last 2 decades, they've, I think, tripled, she said. Don't quote me on that.
I think it's close.
But I think it's close to that. But Republicans, less than 50%, Democrats, less than 40%, and the rest of them are independents. That's insane.
Yeah.
I don't know if that says something about the state of our politics or not, or just the state of the electorate. I don't know.
But then the question, too, and we'll find this out in November, these folks were motivated enough to register to vote. Are they registered enough to come out and vote?
I think it's really hard, unless you're really passionate about one thing, to get those people to stay committed to voting.
The Sooners scored too soon the other day. Right at the end of the game last week. So I was watching this game. There's a reason I'm telling you this. The Sooners went in and tied the game too early. Joey and I were sitting out and said, Texas got time to move the ball, which they did all day long. Texas goes out, kicks field goal, wins the game. Do you think that maybe the GOP moved the Kavanaugh thing too fast? The reason I'm asking is, I think I said 2 weeks ago that whoever wins this deal in November, or the Kavanaugh deal, will win. Is the other side's going to win in November because of the outrage? So I'm wondering, and you're talking about motivation. We've already hit on this, that we're not seeing media make an impact in changing people's minds in Oklahoma. It is what it is. So maybe it's national motivation. Do you see the Kavanaugh thing and the outrage on both sides filtering down to Oklahoma? Does that momentum affect the R's or the D's in Oklahoma at this point? And will it stay a motivating factor?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the right answer to that. Yes.
It's going to motivate the Republicans. It's going to motivate the Democrats. I think it already has. I think we've seen a lot more people jumping on both sides. Like you pointed out before, you've got Republicans who want to defend their president, want to defend this administration. On the Democratic side, there's a lot of outrage over Kavanaugh. I think it's mobilizing both of them. The question is, your analogy as far as the Sooners, was it played too soon? Good possibility. And that's kind of the thought going into this is, a lot of people get very, very excited about things like Kavanaugh very quickly, but then how do you keep that momentum going? A month is a very long time in politics, and to keep people motivated to actually show up may be a difficult thing, but my suspicion is this isn't the last scandal that we're going to be seeing between now and November.
Certainly not in the way that the media coverage has been the last 2 years.
Yep, agreed.
Do you think, real quick, do you think that there is the consideration, I could go public on this. Let's say you're a person you make a phone call, or you make a phone call to somebody and they go, oh, this is going to be bad, this is going to come out there. The consideration is, I could just keep my head down, this story will go away because other media in Oklahoma won't pick up on it. Is that a consideration why you don't seize these? Most of these dark money folks on the national level, they can't wait to get in front of a camera. Okay? In Oklahoma, they're not. So is that a consideration? All right, if I just don't return Brill Beck's phone call or Herm's phone call, it'll go away. News 9 will do the story, maybe a couple other outlets will do the story, and the game over. Because it looks like this game is over.
I think that's absolutely the consideration of doing that. That silence is their answer, and then therefore, if we can't get them to keep doing the story, we only have so many angles we can do the story from, and then that's it. That's all we get.
We saw a perfect example of that this past week. You had asked each of the gubernatorial candidates for copies of their tax information. How did that go?
Well, so Edmondson had released his already to Oklahoma Watch, and then Chris Powell initially said he wasn't going to. He was going to give me the statement he sent them back in August, them being Oklahoma Watch. And then later he said, well, let me get some things together and I can get you these tax returns. I gave him a couple extra days past the deadline because I was still waiting on Stitt, who I'd given an extra 2 weeks for this, and they've never answered. We had a little back and forth, which was unusual. They don't like me very much, but I thought maybe I was making another inroad. And then I was asked if we were doing it to all the statewide offices, and I said no, just the governor's race, and then they stopped. And then I asked them again, like, hey, just so you know, I'm going to give you a couple extra days. Never heard anything back from them. So we got the tax returns for 2 candidates, but not the front runner, who likely has the highest salary and the most invested business interests. So it's fascinating, and his silence is deafening on that, absolutely deafening.
Well, transparency in government spending has been a hot topic on the campaign trail for the state's gubernatorial candidates. So how transparent are they with their own taxes? News 9's Grant Herms has more on the candidates' finances.
Oklahoma stopped requiring candidates for statewide offices to file their tax returns in 2015, but their returns can be telling how a candidate is invested, how much they make, and where their money is coming from. With the midterm elections looming, the candidates for governor have been railing against government waste and a lack of financial transparency. So News 9 asked about their own, asking for the candidates' tax returns. 2 of the 3 have made them public. Democrat Drew Edmondson releasing his returns to the nonprofit outlet Oklahoma Watch back in August. Edmondson and his wife Linda made more than $313,000 in 2017. More than $101,000 from Edmondson's business, roughly $148,000 in pension payments, and $40,000 from Social Security. They also own their Oklahoma City home and a 1/6 share of some rural Oklahoma land. Libertarian Chris Powell also released his returns. Powell and his wife Amy made a combined $84,000 in 2017 solely from wages. Powell works for the Oklahoma City Police Department, his wife for an Oklahoma City law firm. They also own their Bethany home. Republican Kevin Stitt did not release his returns. Stitt's campaign also stopped responding to our requests. But a recent assessment of his privately held company, Gateway Mortgage, says it's on track to handle a portfolio worth $26 billion this year. Transparency experts say while tax returns may not seem like a lot, when it comes to voters, more information is always better.
We, the public, pay their salaries. This is our taxpayer dollars that are going to this. And for the position of governor, they're leading our state. I think that people have a right to know who these people are.
Candidates for office do have to file a limited amount of information about their finances to run. Those can be found on the State Ethics Commission's website. We posted to links of tax returns we received on news9.com. Grant Herms, News 9.
Anybody else asking the question?
I don't think so. Not
Did you guys check the New York Times story out a couple of weeks ago? I mean, the president's finances, that whole thing was fraud. All right, it's not $1 million loan, it's $413 million. I say that to say this. Don't people have a right to know?
I think so, and we just heard Andy Moore a second ago from FY Oklahoma, who hit it right in the head, that these people want to work for us, they're trying to earn our votes. We're going to pay their salaries, we deserve to know who these people are. And on top of it, I think it's strange for Stitt to not release, given the fact that so much of his platform and his campaign have been built on government transparency.
Right.
And I understand not wanting to release your personal finances, but you give some of that up to be a public official and to run for public office.
And Moore hit it right on the head with that too. He says, if we're going to trust these people to be transparent, there's got to be 100% transparency, and that's not what we're seeing right now.
Here's what I'd say. Mr. Stitt, pick up the phone, call Grant Hermes. One-on-one, an exclusive.
An exclusive.
You sit down, talk to this guy, take control. What happens whenever that you take control of the media? Or you look like you're taking control of the media. You look like a leader, okay? And right now, it's a lot of sound bites is what's going on here.
Yeah.
Are you ready to start talking about weed?
Not yet.
We're not ready to start with
Not yet. Well, we had a few more things I want to touch on too with this with the gubernatorial debate.
There goes our first edit of that.
Stitt and Edmondson did participate, and the second debate was hosted. This is interesting. For the first time, hosted by high school students. Bonnie Campo did the story on that.
Tonight was all about energizing young voters to get them to head out to the polls. Students arrived here at Oklahoma City Community College to hear from candidates firsthand.
What I'm most excited about is this opportunity for fellow students to see for themselves what these candidates are all about.
The debate centered on pressing issues facing Oklahoma, like education, especially for these 18-year-old voters.
It's such an honor to be here with my daughter. She's a senior in high school, and you know, this is the future, and this is why I'm running for governor, because I want her coming back, living in Oklahoma, having a bright future here.
I started with high school seniors running my first campaign for state legislature a long time ago. So I know what their capacity is, I know what their energy level can be, and I was just very pleased to be here in a room with them talking about issues important to Oklahoma.
Candidates also touched on topics of health care, prison reform, medical marijuana, and economic growth. Close to 100 students showed up to the debate from districts like Weatherford, Owasso, and Edmond, many belonging to the student-led organization named From Now On.
When I heard that Oklahoma is 47th in voting turnout, that is just shocking to me. And hearing that only 11% of eligible voters from 18 to 24 actually come out and vote is just not good. That's not how I think we should be as a state. So for me personally, I want kids like me to know that, oh wow, our opinion does matter.
Students say they are ready to head out to the polls in November. You can watch the entirety of the debate on news9.com.
So we didn't really garner anything new from there. It was mostly rehashing a lot of the same old stuff in terms of where the candidates stand. But it comes back to the point that we were making before as far as getting younger people energized, getting them to the ballot box. Do you think it's going to work?
I don't think it'll work this year. I think it's a movement, if you want to call it that loosely. That's not my favorite word to use about things, but I think it's an idea that might gain steam over the next couple of years. I think it's sort of an outgrowth of what we saw from the Florida school shooting and those kids down there. Whether or not how you feel about what they were talking about, I think more kids are starting to realize they have to get involved or things won't change the way they want them to. This was interesting, this group From Now On, right? That's the name of the group. Yep. Just 18-year-olds. I think if I had something like that when I was 18, so like 2 years ago, not really.
Almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Who are you taking to the prom this year, by the way?
I haven't asked her yet. I'm very nervous. I'm all sweaty about it.
I really hate this guy. Yeah, I really do.
But like, I think it's interesting. I think it will gain steam over the next couple of years if they can keep engaged themselves.
And that's going to be the hard part. Again, people have ADD when it comes to politics. Today they're energized, tomorrow they're not. So how do we keep them energized? That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, if we knew that, we wouldn't be here doing this.
Now we can talk about pot.
So this committee that's been working on it passed these rules.
Well, after 3 months of back and forth, the group of state lawmakers approves its first set of recommendations to regulate medical marijuana. But right now, there is no guarantee the state health department will agree with those rules. News 9's Aaron Brilbeck is covering the Capitol for us. Aaron?
Now, Kelly, for the past 12 weeks, state lawmakers have been learning about medical marijuana. Well, today, a committee unanimously passed rules to govern it. The legislative committee, made up of Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate, was formed after the Board of Health developed a set of overly restrictive rules. The legislative committee vowed not to do that. Today, they agreed on labeling and testing standards.
After it's grown, we're going to test it to make sure it doesn't have poisons, pesticides, and also test the potency of it. So, I mean, since it's a medicine, just like every other medicine, you want to make sure you know that it actually has the medicinal values you're looking for.
Those testing standards would go into effect May 15th to give laboratories time to set up. Until then, consumers can buy medical marijuana untested and at their own risk.
It very easily could have contaminants, it could have heavy metals, it could really harm you.
But who bears the liability if that happens?
That's a great question for an attorney.
The legislative committee also agreed to recommend allowing dispensaries to sell mature plants, not just seedlings. But keep in mind, these are just recommendations for the Board of Health.
And if they don't approve what we are recommending, I mean, this is simply a recommendation from us. So if they don't, what's our next step?
I think at that moment, the need for the legislature to be called into special session goes through the roof.
Lawmakers say they're pleased with this first set of recommendations.
We had a room full of people that wanted to do what was right. We worked through some hard issues that not everyone agreed with on everything, and we compromised. And today is a day I'm going to go home feeling like it was better.
Now, there was nothing stunning about these recommendations. These were simply saying that we have to test the medical marijuana before it's sold. Who disagrees with that? They don't want any heavy metals in there. They don't want any pesticides in there. Nobody disagrees with that, and they want proper labeling. Nobody disagrees with that. So It was a unanimous vote. These discussions are going to get much harder, but this is a good way to start it. You've got a bipartisan group, Republicans and Democrats, in the House and Senate for the first time in a long time, 100% agreeing with each other. These are the things that we have to do. It's a good start.
Right, and especially at the last couple sessions and special sessions, any progress is good progress when it's in this direction. And who'd have thought that the thing that would inspire compromise in Oklahoma, of all states, would be weed?
Yeah.
How crazy is that?
Well, they made a joint decision.
Yeah, and there's heavy
who was
metal.
going to make the first pun of the three of
And
us.
heavy metal and weed.
Yeah.
Do they go together?
Yeah. I also think it's an interesting thing here that they also said until the end of the next session, so until May 15th.
Right.
So part of that, too, is so nakedly politically craven that it almost hurt to listen to. Because until then, people who are trying to get medication they believe in are going to have to do it at their own risk, which could end up harming them more. And
but to be fair, it's going to take a while to set up these laboratories to do it properly. And I understand that. And part of what this group was doing was saying, we're not going to stand in the way of 788. If people want the medical marijuana now, we're going to give it to them now at their own risk. And in the interim, we'll set up these labs, and hopefully by the 15th, there will be enough of these labs set up that everything is being tested properly.
What I meant by nakedly craven was the fact that they didn't call a special session to deal with these things sooner. We could have had this done, and it could have been in place in the same time scale by November 15th had we done it right after the primaries and the vote for 788, and we just didn't. And so now we got a lot of people who might be in harm's way, maybe needlessly.
And again, though, in defense of the legislature on this one, a lot of these guys, myself included, don't know much about pot. I mean, we haven't done anything with pot since high school, again for you 2 years ago. But we haven't, most of us don't know much about pot at all. And pot has changed a lot. There's a lot more strains than the ragweed stuff that I used to smoke when I was in 9th grade. So it's changed a lot, and these guys need to learn a lot before they can properly pass legislation. I wouldn't want to see them just, passing legislation for the sake of passing legislation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the amount of experts they brought in and they listened to and actually took that advice to heart and made their own recommendations is admirable and something that we haven't really seen too much of in recent years.
Right. But with the passage of the rules that and keep in mind, these rules right now, this isn't the law of the land. This is a recommendation to the Board of Health, and the Board of Health could very easily say, nope, we ain't going to do it.
Because that went so well last time.
It went very well for them last time. So I don't expect that's going to happen. The legislature is saying in so many words, you guys don't pass these, we're going to call a special session, we're going to flex some muscles. There's no way the Board of Health is not going to go forward with this after the mess that they created last time around with this. But we're already starting to see there's going to be more issues with medical marijuana. First and foremost, banking.
Under federal law, marijuana remains illegal and is therefore a violation of the criminal statutes for a bank or credit union to bank funds related to marijuana. But it is a business decision that the institution can make. If they choose to, but they must file Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. They must file suspicious activity reports in compliance with the Bank Secrecy Act and marijuana-related activities. We're telling them, you can do it, it's a business decision, but if you do, you're violating federal law. So we're not going to prosecute them, but we don't know that U.S. attorney might not be prosecuted.
As a new kid on the block, if you will, with all of these, with medical marijuana now being a factor, that we could come under increased scrutiny just because we're new at this, and mistakes will be made, I think, predictably. So I think the federal government will have, at least at the beginning, some increased scrutiny on us and come under a microscope to make sure we're doing everything right.
So here's my prediction on that. You're going to see the president order a rescheduling of marijuana very, very soon.
You think it'll be scheduled to still be a Schedule 1 narcotic unless it's used for medicinal purposes?
I think it's going to be done away with altogether. I think it's going to be Schedule 2. And here's why. There's so much money to be made from this. And right now, this money is going to be stored in the back room of some pot shop. And that just doesn't work. If the government wants access to this money, if they want to properly tax it, if they want to be able to use this money, and it's going to be a huge amount of money, it's got to be in the banking system. And that's the only way to ensure that the money's being controlled properly, because the banks monitor that stuff. They write reports to the IRS if there's weird stuff going on. The only way to monitor this properly is to have the money in the banks.
What do you think the number of states is that'll be the tipping point for the feds to change their minds? 40?
I'm surprised it hasn't happened already.
I mean, me too.
Quite honestly.
Just because of the amount of money on the macro level for the economy that it would, and also on the micro level, if they cared about small business owners, keeping stuff in your safe or like a drawer under the front desk.
Your mattress, it doesn't make sense.
It is unsafe. These people are targets for thieves all over the place, all over the country. They already are here.
If you want to regulate the money going in and out, it's got to be put in a bank, period. And the nation stands to make a lot of money from this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my idea is they're going to reschedule it.
What's your timeline for that? You think 2 years, 5 years?
I would say less than that. I'd say probably within a year.
Okay.
I mean, you've got two kinds of states right now, those that have medical marijuana and those that are considering medical marijuana. It's got to happen.
I've got two more numbers for you. 45, the president. He's talked about it. It's a money-making deal. We come back to those situations. He always comes around with it. All right, that's all the time we've got, folks. Thanks for seeing this, watching it, following us on Twitter. Grant Harms, Aaron Brailbeck, thanks for being here. See you next week on Mitchell Talks, the News 9 session.